How many businesses fail due to cash flow problems? 82% of business failures are cash flow related, but that's not the interesting part. Most were profitable. They were profitable on paper, but bankrupt in reality. And so I'm about to show you what kills half of those businesses. By the end of this video, you're going to find out 3 weekly moves that will prevent cash flow failure. All right, so 82% of failures were related to cash flow, but there's some numbers that once you start to dig, you start to scratch your head and go, wait a second, and you realize how vulnerable we can be around some of this stuff. 50% of those failures that I talked about, actually when you look at their P&L, their paper profit, they were actually profitable, and yet it led them to failure. What in the world happened? So think about this. On your paper, you've got profitability, but in your bank account, you have 0. 4% of businesses live to see their 10th birthday, and almost half of those fail. Why? It's not just because the owner gets tired, although that's a big part of it. 38% of startups fail because they run out of cash. It's not because their pricing's wrong, it's not because their inventory's wrong, it's because simply they run out of cash. And once the cash dries up, we have no more options. That's a good note to make if you're writing some of these down, and that is cash brings options. And so if you want options, then we've got to prioritize cash. Some of you come to instructional trainings like this and think, well, Scott, I don't have a college degree. I'm not very smart. I had a contractor tell me about a month and a half ago, Scott, I'm just not very smart. And he had built a $10 million business. And I really kind of went back on him. And I said, hey, I don't want to hear about smarts, not smarts. In fact, half of my client book right now does not have a college degree, but they've got successful businesses. So don't blame smarts or lack of smarts for this. We're going to look at this as an issue of cash flow and other elements within the business. I want to give you some myths and truths as to why businesses fail, and then give you 3 elements to make sure yours doesn't. There is a glaring myth within the element of business that if you go into any financial meetings, everybody's going to want to talk about P&L, EBITDA numbers, all of this other stuff. But the reality is you could have a profit and loss statement that shows a number on the bottom, but you look at your bank account and the number is very, very different. So the myth is this, that your profit and loss statement is a primary measure of business health. It is not. You know what I would much rather have as an advisor and as a coach is I want to look at your cash accounts. The first thing that we do when we work with clients is, we'll take a look at their P&Ls to get a general overview, but then we'll go look at the cash accounts to go, here's what's really happening with the cash in the bank. Well, I've got this coming. This guy promised me and they said they were going to do this. Yes, but it's not there yet. So you can have positive numbers on your P&L, but you can have an empty bank account. And that's why many of you are here on this video to figure out how do we reverse that trend. So myth number 1 is that your P&L is an accurate health metric for your business. And then there's an even bigger myth number 2, and that is the myth that you're in a safe spot by letting your CPA or your accountant fully handle your finances. Many business owners just stick their head in their sand and they go, well, I've got a CPA that does that, or I've got an accountant that does that, or whatever. Well, the reality is if you've got a fractional CPA or accountant, or even somebody in-house full-time, remember, it's not their money, and they're going to pay far more attention to their own money than they are with your money. There have got to be controls in place, and you need to put eyeballs on it on a frequent, regular basis with what we call the RPMs of great leadership: repetition, predictability, and meaning. And so to counteract those myths, we need this truth, is you need to put your eyeballs on the money at least once a week or with some regularity and frequency, because money does weird things to people. In fact, many of you could tell a story right now of somebody in your life that they've gone sideways, they've gone upside down because money has just started to flip them over for whatever reason. They don't have enough of it. They've got too much of it. They begin to hoard it. Maybe they give too much of it away. They don't make enough of it. Money is one of those things that it's got a behavior of its own. In fact, here's how the behavior works. $1 out is always more than $1, and $1 in is always less. When you go to buy a sandwich at the store, you don't pay $9.95 like the menu board says for that sandwich. Instead, you pay $9.95 plus taxes, fees, tips, whatever it might be. $1 in is always less than $1. What does that mean? You get a receivable for $1,000. Do you get to keep all that? No, it's not all yours. You got to pay some here in cost of goods and some to operating expense, some to the government. And so $1 out's always more, $1 in is always less. Money has its own behavior. We need to name it, and we need to put controls in place. That's the great truth to the 2 myths. So there are 3 weekly moves that I want to talk about. The first hinges on what I just said about money having its own behavior. Within the behavior of money, we need to see money and partition it into 3 areas. Notice what I just did there. Instead of money controlling me, I am now going to get in the driver's seat and start to control money. And so I'm looking at the tool, the utilitarian tool of this dollar, and I'm going to put it into 3 phases: past, present, and future. And so past is anything related to anything that you can print out on a sheet of paper. Balance sheets, profit and loss statements, cash flow statements, etc. Anything you run reports in bookkeeping software, we're going to relegate that to the past relegation of money. So that's how we're going to look at that. The present is anything that's in your cash accounts. That's what you actually have at this moment right now. And then the future are any sort of dashboards and things that we're looking at, budgets, pro formas, calculators, anything like that we're looking at and making projections for what's going to come. And so a weekly cash move that we need to look at is looking at the present view of cash every single week. That leads to the second move, and if we want to look at cash every single week, then what we do is we take the cash that comes in, and instead of putting it into 1, 2, or 3 bank accounts, we put it into 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 bank accounts. Why in the world would we do that? Well, I want you to think about money this way. When it's all in one big bucket, think about a big bucket of popcorn. It's all in one big bucket. You don't know whose money that is. It's just all in a bucket right there. So that money might be for the government for taxes. It could be for operating overhead. It could be for reinvestment back into the business. But if it's all in one bucket and somebody comes to you and goes, hey, we need to buy a new van. And you look in the bucket and you're like, there's a lot of money in there. Okay, go buy the new van. But if we had all that money split up into 7, 8, 9 different bank accounts and you had a capital expense account and somebody asks you for a new van but there's only $5,000 in the capital expense account, then you know you can't buy that van. We have got to start slicing up dollars when they come in so that we can view it in the present and we control the tool rather than the tool controlling us. And then the third weekly move that we can do to bust those myths and lean into those truths is this, is we can start tracking our ABCs every week. What in the world is that? Accounts, bookkeeping, customers. So go back to our accounts. That's our subdivided bank accounts, not the big bucket, but the 7, 8, 9 smaller buckets. And so we want to have those on a spreadsheet, literally every single account on the spreadsheet. And we want to put the account balances every week for 52 weeks a year. And so we're literally going to watch the flow of that cash in the bank accounts. The second category is the bookkeeping, the receivables, the payables. So we're going to track those numbers every single week. How much do we owe in receivables? 0 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 90. That's going to make us aware of who we need to go after to get this cash in order for us to be able to get it back out in the payables that we owe. And then the C is for customers. What are those customer metrics that are important to you? Is it website hits? Is it Facebook traffic? Is it one-on-one appointments over coffee? Is it meeting with architects? Whatever that thing looks like, you want to begin to track that. So we're looking at our A, B, C's, accounts, bookkeeping, customers, every single week. If we can start to look at this every week, we're looking in the present with cash, with an eye on the past and the future, understanding that money has its own behavior, dollar's not a dollar. Then we position ourselves to ward off failure and we can propel ourselves into success. And instead of being one of the 96% of businesses that fail within the first 10 years, we can hop in the category of being the minority and being one of the 4% that succeeds. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take action. I've got a free gift that will propel you to be able to walk through and start to set these weekly moves up for yourself. It'll help you show how to subdivide your cash accounts, to follow your ABCs, and to have those weekly touch points to track those so that you can propel yourself into health. Go to solvecashflow.com. There's a link in the description below. We've set up a unique page with a handbook. Our team's put together a handbook that you and your team can begin to follow to start to implement some of this. So instead of opting for business failure, you can opt to be liberated from business chaos, to make time for what matters most.